Hello, friends. Hello, friends. A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer.
Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
This is the 19th Tee podcast. Kieran Marsh and Nathan Drudy back with you, Drudster. What an incredible weekend of golf. I don't know sitting here, I'm certain sitting here a week ago that had I anticipated saying that Brian Harman would be the 2023 champion golfer of the year and a 6-stroke winner of the 151st Open Championship at Royal Liverpool, that we probably would have delved a little bit deeper into my mental stability at the time. Certainly wasn't a factor in our selections.
No.
Upon reflection, that may be a poorer, I suppose, sentiment about us than it was about Brian, but a remarkable win, not just by virtue of the individual holding aloft the claret jug, but the conditions in which he did it, and really the control that he oozed over 4 rounds of golf.
Well, I mean, going back a few years, it was him and Paul Casey were my roughies that I went through a phase with him, and I just completely got off the boil with him. But I mean, what a phenomenal 4 days. 3 days really, where he kind of just ascended to the top and stayed there, and was just dominant. Really, I mean, there was ultimately it was over after 54 holes. Realistically, I mean, obviously, major championships are very funny things, and I think deep down I wanted some chaos to happen. But I mean, and quite fortuitous as well, because we often call him Punter Harman because of his likeness to Ricky Ponting, that his major championship victory comes as we retain the Ashes in what was rather sweet circumstances, I think, overnight in Manchester there. So I've quite enjoyed today.
Yeah, the rain played its role, kind of in the northwestern corners of the United Kingdom, both from a golf perspective. It certainly had an influence on the final round at Hoylake, but also, as you say, from a cricket perspective for the Ashes. Look, I think maybe philosophically where I want to start is just your general thoughts on Brian Harman as a winner, because to your point, like, it's not a name that would be unfamiliar with people who've been on this journey of the 19th tee with us from inception. We've often, to your point, whether it's kind of calling him out as a roughie or speaking in detail about his penchant for getting out to red hot starts in first rounds at majors and factoring after 18 holes. But certainly this is the best 4 rounds we've seen him put together at a major championship. And I think it's a unique narrative because it's been a little while since we've seen someone from, I suppose, the second or third tier, without wanting to oversimplify, the men's golf rankings, but someone from the second or third tier and someone whose game doesn't necessarily fit naturally with where the game at a macro level is trending. So I don't know, your reflection on 4 days of seeing a very unlikely winner emerge and how that kind of leaves you feeling as a big fan of the Open Championship in this major.
Well, I think firstly, you raised a really good point when we did our preview that generally winners of the Open Championship in the last handful of years have been a little bit older, and I think he's 35, 36, right? So, I mean, tick a box there. I've kind of went back and forth on this a little bit today because I've heard people say, oh, well, it wasn't that interesting to see Brian Harman win. And there's certainly an element of that. Would I have loved to have seen Rory and John Rahm dueling it down 18? Of course, like, I'm a golf fan, absolutely. But I think there's something quite special about someone who has toiled for quite a long time on the tour, break through and win a major championship. And arguably probably the toughest of the 4 majors to win in a lot of ways, given the conditions, given the fact that this style of course these players only see literally once a year. So I was actually quite pleased to see someone like Brian Harman ascend to the top and kind of stay there. And as I said, once he was out by 5 or 6 shots, it seemed as though that gap never really got closed by anyone who was behind him. I said the winning score was going to be 7 under, and I mean, that's where our second place finishers finished, right? So I think to your point, I'm certainly not really buying into the whole, well, it was a boring golf tournament because, Brian Harman does nothing for me. Like, sure, Brian Harman doesn't excite me, doesn't move the needle, as we like to say, right? But there was something quite special to me about a dude who has toiled for a long time going out and winning the Open Championship. So I don't know if that's where you're kind of sitting or if you're buying into the narrative that's going around.
Not at all, to be honest. I think two things can be true at the same time, and you're not necessarily vibe as much with Brian Harman as you may do with other players.
Of course.
But you can respect a great deal what he's done. And I actually think it's pretty poor what I've seen in a lot of corners of those who support the game to say it's a dud result and he's a boring winner. And it's ultimately Brian Harman played the same golf courses the full field did for the first 2 days and half the field did for the remaining two. And he managed to win the tournament by 6 strokes. I think to your point, it's one of those rare majors. We haven't seen one in a long time where realistically it was won through the second and third round. And that, I think, way more than I suppose the individual that lifts the trophy contributes to it being a less than interesting tournament is when you've got someone who runs away with it, really, and there's no real drama to follow in the back nine in particular. But we've had some. I reflect on it now. That's the final men's major of the year, obviously, and we've had winners: John Rahm, Brooks Koepka, Wyndham Clark, Brian Harman. Now, Wyndham and Clark and Brian Harman, you wouldn't have pegged at the beginning of the year as being 2 of the 4 major champions, but even Wyndham Clark is different in the sense that he's young. He's on his way up, and he fits the mold of the modern-day PGA Tour player in terms of his length. There's something very romantic about Brian Harman winning this tournament specifically. We spoke a lot about it in the lead up to. We spoke a lot about how different the Open Championship is, how it's a great leveler, how it brings the field back, how it rewards resilience, rewards patience, all these things that we don't tend to pick a Brian Harman out of a line because those questions don't get asked on a week in, week out basis.
Sure.
So I'm not actually at all surprised when I see someone like him pop up and win this, in the sense that, obviously, of course, I'm surprised. But if you actually think about it critically, we feel as though it's an unusual result because this tournament in and of itself is unusual compared to the remainder of the schedule. So the questions that it asks are not questions that we see being asked on a week in, week out basis. And I think if you can take a step back and appreciate that, you appreciate his victory an awful lot more, because to be as dominant as what he was, to win this tournament by 6 strokes, particularly as conditions deteriorated significantly across the weekend, is quite remarkable, really, that there were others who we expect fairly or unfairly more of, who couldn't conquer the course the way in which he did. It is really, I think, a testament to him. And it may not necessarily be on the balance of time one we reflect on and say, geez, I love the 2023 Open comparatively to those around it. But I think in isolation, watching the 4 days, you take nothing away from him because his performance was clinical, really.
Well, I think you're bang on, and there's probably an element of where I can see certainly where people are saying, oh, well, it wasn't the most interesting tournament because of A, Brian Harman. I don't really get excited about him, and B, the margin of victory. And I can see that point, but I don't think anything should be taken away from what was done. I mean, 6-stroke victory going back to, I'm just looking here, Shane Lowry won in 2019, right, by 6 shots. And we lauded him for winning by 6 strokes. It was a dominant performance. I mean, you have to go back a long way back to find anything better than that, which was 2010. Louis Oosthuizen won by 7 shots at St Andrews. I mean, it was such a uniquely dominant performance, and I don't know. I'm not buying into the narrative that it was boring, because I don't think it was necessarily, to be perfectly honest. I think there is something to be perhaps considered about, do we do we? And maybe this is maybe leading into your winner pick, which we'll get to. But do we perhaps oversimplify it sometimes by thinking that the winner of the Open could/will come from England, Ireland, and Northern Ireland, Scotland, because that's where they play links golf. And I mean, like Brian Harman, Cameron Smith, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, the exception, Molinari, Spieth, Stenson, Johnson, and then McIlroy. So there's only two in like the last sort of 10 years that have actually grown up playing links golf. Sometimes I think we might oversimplify it and look past some of these guys who have not necessarily grown up playing, not grown up playing links golf. So I don't know. It was just food for thought that I was thinking about earlier today.
I think it's a good point. I think we tend to revert to either born in the UK and therefore, you cut your teeth in this format, or we revert to the skills that we believe links golf prioritizes, and that's iron play.
Sure.
It's getting up and down from difficult spots from around the green, and ultimately it's putting. I mean, I don't think there's any secret that, the guy who ultimately is lifting the claret jug was 58 from 59 inside of 10 feet this week, like completely metronomic with the putter in hand. Now, some people would say that's a misleading statistic because you don't know how many of those inside 10 feet are inside 3 feet. Sure. I don't think it necessarily matters because it's semantics at the point at which he's literally missed one of the attempts that he made. I think it was like 98 point something percent efficiency from that distance, where I saw a lot of guys that on balance you would suggest are more talented golfers missed putts from inside 5 feet this week. So I think you're right in the sense that there's little things I think that we are reminded of, ironically in hindsight, never leading in, because we always fall back into old habits leading into an Open Championship. But there are things that we're reminded of in hindsight. I saw something a little earlier. It was a statistic from Justin Ray, which I thought was excellent. Average driving distance ranking of major winners since 2015 in the week of their victory. So the Open is just short of 40. So the average driving distance ranking of the Open winners since 2015 is 39.9. The other three majors combined is 18.7. So that in and of itself, right, is like distance straight away. It just doesn't matter. And we fall into the trap time and time again. You look at little things along the way that point to someone like a Brian Harman winning. Now, there are plenty of other guys in the field that aren't long and plenty of other guys in the field who hit a nice iron that we probably would have nominated first. But I think the more that you critically review rather than being lost in your own biases or romantic notions who you wanted to win, it's actually not all that surprising given his style of play and how well it suits a course like this and a format like this. So, yeah, I tend to agree that, unfortunately, and he's the one laughing now, realistically, because he's the 151st Open champion and in convincing fashion. But, yeah, I think we do overlook someone like a Brian Harman often because we simply continue to understate the significance of playing this style of golf like for max 2 weeks a year if you happen to come to one of the lead-in tournaments. So, yeah, I don't know. It probably leads into a broader conversation later that we might have as well around my continually softening stance around whether I prefer the Masters over the Open Championship. But this is such an enticing, as a viewer, and I can imagine as a player, if you embrace it, such an enticing week because it offers an opportunity, as I say, if you can, we talked about it last week, Drews. We said, like, the people who will emerge from the pack will be the people who can weather the storm, who will understand that they'll hit a great fucking tee shot and not necessarily get rewarded for it, right? Yeah. And not to overreact, to remain measured, to remain calm, to close the gap between your ceiling and your floor this week. I mean, other than the 2 bogeys he hit in his front 9 in the 3rd round, he barely faltered. There were plenty of other guys out there, someone like a Sepp Striker. Sepp Striker was had birdies falling out of his pockets, but he couldn't minimize the bogeys, right? And it's like we know what's required, and ultimately Brian Harman delivered that so much more neatly and perfectly and consistently over 72 holes than anyone else. And it should be of little surprise to anyone who watched the tournament seriously over the last 4 days that he's emerged, a convincing winner.
8th in driving accuracy percentage on the tour. So which was so critical to it. The amount of guys that just simply put themselves out of position off the tee and then were unable to get up and down was staggering, right? I was just doing a quick bit of research on the prize money earned by the 4 major champions this year, and I was going to see if you wanted to have a go at ranking them, but it's actually not that hard. So you've got Wyndham Clark, Harman, Brooks Koepka, and John Rahm. In what order do you think? So
I know the
lowest.
Open. Yeah, I know the Open. I know the Open Championship.
This is all time career PGA.
All time. Okay.
All time.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Wyndham Clark will be the lowest.
Yes.
Brian Harman, I think, has surprisingly more than you would expect, but I still don't think he's got more than a 5-time major champion, and I certainly don't think he's got more than a guy who has won 2 majors and has won like 6 or 7 times in the last 2 years. So I'm going to say Brian Harman is 3rd.
Correct.
And this is where it gets difficult, just because Brooks has won more majors, but I don't think more tournaments on balance. So I'm going to say Brooks 2nd, Rahm 1st.
Well done.
Yeah.
So give me the number for Brian Harman's all-time PGA Tour career earnings then.
Including today?
I'm not sure. This is just according to the PGA Tour's website.
Okay. I reckon it's probably going to exclude today. I reckon Brian Harman has won in the early 20 millions of dollars.
Interesting. Okay, so Wyndham Clark 15.3. You had him correct.
Yeah.
You had Brooks Koepka correct at 2nd at 42.7 and John Rahm 1st at 51.3.
Wow.
Brian Harman has won 31.9.
That's insane.
Which is staggering for a dude who's won like 3 times or 4 times or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's consistency.
So anyway, that was just a fun little game. But I think, to pick up on your point, he just seemed in control. And there were times where I know he started the 4th round. I mean, the leaderboard thing on the Open website's not actually that good, but I know he started. He had a few. What did he have? He bogeyed 2 and 5 in the final round on the front 9, and at that point I thought, oh boy, like here we go. Here's the fireworks, right? And then just return serve with birdie on 6 and 7. So we're back to even. And by that point, I was kind of like, no one's really mounting a charge here. Rahm was having a go. Straka had a go. But no one was really, you're talking, that's at that point, I think it was about a 5-shot swing. Just the ability for him to stay calm and stay in the moment was so impressive, because I think I wrote in my 54-hole takes that I could see him losing the tournament. And that was probably more or less just because this was sort of the first time that he'd really been at the pointy end of a major championship, right? You never know what pressure is going to do to people, particularly when you got someone like John Rahm breathing down your neck. But he just seemed unflustered throughout the whole round. And, by the time he made the turn, it was largely game over, and made some incredible up and downs as well. I think it was it 4 or 3 that he was like just short-sighted on in the shit, and just got himself out and drained like a 10-foot putt. Just really, really classy stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't probably have too much more that I can say about Brian Harman. I think it creates a really interesting argument. I mean, I suggest he's probably going to automatically qualify for the Ryder Cup now. I mean, winning a major championship, I would suggest. I
find it really hard to believe Zach Johnson can leave the British Open champion out of his team.
Well, I mean, it raises a great discussion point, right? Because I mean, there are some people who we consider locks in that team from a figuratively speaking, that are not locks right now. I'm talking about people like Justin Thomas.
100%. And I think, obviously, that's outside of the remaining women's major tournaments of the year. That's the next big ticket item, and I'm sure we'll spend a fair bit of time on, particularly the European team, given our leniency toward the Royal Blue on this podcast. But I actually think, the American side of the equation for the Ryder Cup has become far more intriguing. And Zach Johnson's got some really difficult decisions to make because, I think you cannot ignore recent form, and you do so at your peril as it relates to a Ryder Cup. So I would think he's there. Look, I think the only other thing I want to say about him is I think it's probably understated the difficulty. Cam Smith did it last year to an extent, but I think that was a little bit different given he came over the top of Rory. But I think it's understated difficulty of being the guy that stands between UK golf fans and a victory for a UK golfer. Like it's a different crowd and a far more knowledgeable crowd and a far more cultured crowd as it relates to golf. But equally as hostile. Like he was greeted by boos at the opening tee today, which is quite incredible, really, when it's the leader of the tournament by 4 or 5 shots. And he spoke in the press conference about the heckling he received playing with Tommy Fleetwood in the 3rd round. Super impressive in the sense that nothing really seemed to faze him. To your point, drops a couple of bogeys, immediately responds, not just with even par to kind of stem the bleeding. He hits right back with a couple of birdies. And I just think, as I said, a different situation last year in the sense that Cam hits a 63 on Sunday, including a back 930, to literally run over the top of Rory. And they didn't really see it coming until it was almost too late. Whereas Harman's, right out in front, and they're willing their guy to get across the line and death riding him at the same time. I just don't think that should be overlooked about it. That was a factor. I don't have any doubt about that. And sure, last night, the 4th round was, if there had not been any rain, I think it might have been a bit of a different equation and things may have got a little bit closer. I think the rain made it very difficult on both sides of the coin in the sense of made it difficult for him to fall away significantly, but also difficult for people to make up ground quickly. It was very trying conditions, but he got himself in a position to win through the first kind of 3 rounds and having never been in that position before, having to wait, 26, 27 hours between finishing and starting again, having all the time in the world to get lost in your own thoughts. It never looked like it was going to be anyone other than Brian Harman lifting the claret jug. And that's immensely impressive from a guy who has weathered an awful lot in his career to ultimately get, rewarded with one of the best prizes in the game.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's very well said. I think that's you've nailed it.
Brian Harman. That's probably enough on punter. I'd say that's a line under punter. I think we kind of agreed that given the unique nature of this in the sense that our winner won by 6 and there's not an awful lot to talk about in terms of the cut and thrust of the final round or the drama, what we might do is just spend a little bit of time on the group of 4 at 7 under who are tied for second. And then we work our way through our picks. So I think Jon Rahm is a natural place to start here. I said to you, Drudes, in our preview that I've never been as close to selecting someone simultaneously to win and not to win as I was Jon Rahm. It was really hard to get a gauge. Obviously, the Masters champion this year, his most recent performance was a miscut and he'd taken a few weeks off. Really difficult to get a gauge on where he's at. And having kind of plotted his way through the first 2 rounds, he goes out and breaks the course record on Saturday and shoots a lightning 63 in difficult conditions. I kind of feel like if it was going to be anyone, it was going to be him. I didn't necessarily buy into the Cam Young hype because I'm not quite a believer just yet in Cameron Young, but we saw the very best of Jon Rahm on Saturday, and it was nice to see that fire again. He's one of my favourites, and when he's at his best, there's few better to watch. And it was good to see the juices flowing and to have him as part of the conversation again going into the final round of a major.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that third round was incredible, really. I mean, the way that he was just peeling off birdies, and I think it was 8 under, wasn't it, that he finished at was quite incredible just to see how he plotted his way around the course on a day where a lot of people faltered as well. It wasn't a day that everyone went out and scored super low. There were lots of 1s and 2 unders and whatever, but having a look at data golf here, he was first in strokes gained putting that day, unsurprisingly, second tee to green and fourth off the tee, 14th approach, 15th around the green. So he was exceptional everywhere. I mean, if there's a knock on him across the week, he was 32nd in around the green strokes gained. So maybe that's the only real knock. But he just continues to just lurk and linger around at majors, and I always get a little bit worried. And when I said that there was no guarantee that Punter Harman was going to win after 54 holes, it was probably going to be Jon Rahm who was going to overrun him at the end of the day. So, yeah, it's another incredibly solid performance from Jon Rahm. There's no doubt that I'm sure he'll probably be a little disappointed that he didn't make hay while the sun was shining, literally on the first day and a half. But he continues to impress me, and I have no doubt that he will be lifting another major championship trophy very soon anyway.
Jason Day as well. I think just given the form, you and I selected ahead of the tournament who we respectively thought were going to be our highest finishing Australians, and neither of us picked Jason, despite him being the most recent winner from Australia on the PGA Tour. I think that was indicative of where he's been since that victory. It was kind of a peak, and then there has been a bit of a steady fall off since. He really found something particularly, through the final 54 holes. He goes 4 under, 2 under, and then 2 under again in these conditions today to finish in a tie for second. Let me read you a little stat. He joins a pretty illustrious list of players to finish runner-up in all 4 majors in their career. So prior to him today, there was Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, Jack Nicklaus, Greg Norman, Louis Oosthuizen, Arnold Palmer, Tom Watson, and Craig Wood. So elite company, maybe not necessarily the stat you're after, to know that you've been, one hand maybe on the trophy in all 4 majors, but, Jay Day shows that again, in the, twilight years of his career, having endured so many challenges with his body, that he's found something that's more than capable of challenging at the biggest tournaments of the year again.
Well, I think that's entirely correct. He was, I mean, it probably surprised me a little. I'm not going to lie that he finished as high as he did. I think that's perhaps, I feel like that's fair anyway. But on the same hand, like, I genuinely feel that this is arguably his best performance of the year. I know he won. I know he won the Byron Nelson, right? But the way that he was able to hang around in a major championship, I think tells a really good story that Jason Day has a fair bit of life left in him, particularly in the immediate future anyway. Clearly the win is fantastic, but to then go and do it at the major championship level again, he's been there. He's ascended to the top once in 2015, the PGA Championship, as we know, but I almost feel that this is a better performance than him going out and winning the Byron Nelson, because this is what you play for. There's only 4 tournaments of a year that really matter, maybe 5 if you count the Players' Championship. So yeah, I was really impressed with Jason Day, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. It's really nice. We said it when he won the Byron Nelson, but it's really nice to see him wind back the clock, given I think how easy and maybe at the time more beneficial to his health that it would have been to give it away. So nice to see him there and thereabouts. And his wedge play in particular this week was unbelievable. So yeah, great to see him back where he belongs at the pointy end. Sepp Straka, briefly, Drudes. I think, as I said, like, the guy was rolling in birdies for fun. Unfortunately, he probably couldn't minimize the amount of shots that he dropped, but I think what he's done here, if nothing else, is absolutely sew up his spot on the European Ryder Cup team, which kind of we had flagged before, which is amazing for a guy who attended the University of Georgia and lives in Birmingham, Alabama. But he looks as though he'll be well and truly in the mix for the Europeans and bring a really, I think, I won't say deciding, but certainly a point of difference to their team. He's a bully on the golf course, and when he gets on a run, he really runs hot. So certainly one of his better performances in a major championship. A recent winner as well on the PGA Tour. So he's coming into a bit of form as a European when it matters to put your name in those conversations.
Certainly, yeah. Good weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs. They've had obviously had the winner and Sepp Straka as well. I mean, yeah, you mentioned he murders the ball. He's immensely impressive off the tee. And look, to be honest, again, another dude who really surprised me being that far up the leaderboard. I know he's played very well in Europe, and all the numbers do actually point to a good showing from him around the green. He's 137th, so that certainly stands out. And having a look at the numbers, that was backed up. He was 67th this week, but second strokes gained approach, fourth off the tee, and serviceable off. Fourth tee to green, serviceable off the tee, and putting as well. So, yeah, he's probably going to be playing Ryder Cup golf this year, you'd suggest.
I'd imagine. And then the final player in the group of four that were tied at 7 under in second position is Tom Kim. Two things for you here, Druids. And bearing in mind, he's already a 2-time winner on the PGA Tour. He's the youngest runner-up in any major since Jordan Spieth in 2014, and the youngest runner-up at the Open Championship since Seve Ballesteros in 1976. 21 years of age, as I said, already a 2-time winner on the PGA Tour, and a flusher's flusher. Like, he absolutely, his irons are immense. We saw flashes of it at the President's Cup, where he certainly made a name for himself. And I know people are struggling to kind of peg him in terms of where he sits in the hierarchy, but this is a kid who, has won 2 tournaments, has stepped up in a major team tournament, and now, as I said, becomes the youngest runner-up at a major since Jordan Spieth, and also joins a list that includes Seve Ballesteros as it relates to the Open Championship. So, yeah, a great run. 4 under today. It's the equal low round, which we'll get to in terms of our giveaway shortly.
Yep.
But it's the equal low round to finish on Sunday, which we love.
Yep. Second in strokes gained putting for the week. So it kind of paints the picture for you. The putter was very, very good. And looking back at the scorecard, I probably didn't realize it at the time, but he was probably really the most legitimate challenger to Brian Harman, to be honest. I mean, it makes that birdie on 4 and then eagles 5, and all of a sudden it's game on. He's gone out and in a couple under, started bogey, which kind of threw his chances away. But yeah, I mean, it's an impressive performance from a young kid who's going to be a big part of the PGA Tour moving forward, and also a big part of the President's Cup team. I think is something to kind of just keep in the back of our minds as well.
We'll absolutely rue the 74 on Thursday. Also, I'm not sure if you saw this, encountered a bit of an interesting injury.
No.
So I can't remember. I think it was Friday into Saturday. I don't think it was Thursday into Friday.
Mm-hmm.
But he apparently tripped on his patio, or tripped off his patio in the Airbnb that he was staying, and suffered what was described as a grade 1 tear to the ankle. I've never heard of a grade 1. I've heard of grade 1 like strains. I've heard of grade 1 sprains. Never heard of a grade 1 tear to the ankle. Anyway, his ankle blew up like a balloon, played through it, and yeah, I mean, I'm not saying let's pin a Purple Heart on him, but still walked 54 holes on a bung ankle. So, and done that, impressively to finish in a tie for second. So, a good weekend for Tom Kim.
Yes.
I think that's a neat segue to go to our tips, because we encounter a few kind of moving through the next wave of players. The first name I see here is the man that you nominated would not win this tournament. And that proved to be pretty astute. Rory McIlroy was good, but never really challenged.
No, I mean, was like everyone. It's hard because I don't want to make this personal about Rory, but was way too far back, as was everyone else in the field. I had a good little run today. I think he made 3 birdies in a row in the front 9 to kind of bob his head up a little bit. But yeah, just when you're starting from so far back, it was always going to be difficult. Short game was really poor. 38th putting, 44th around the green. The rest of the game was inside the top 10 in terms of approach off the tee and tee to green. So he was actually second in strokes gained tee to green this week, which is quite incredible. Really, when Punter Harman was 17th tee to green. So disappointing week for Rory, no doubt. I mean, it's another one that slips away in terms of opportunities to win major championships, but yeah, I mean, at least I get a tip right, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And we would have liked to have seen it. I mean, I can hardly talk, but we always love to see our white wins just a touch higher to make it interesting. But look, I think there was obviously an awful lot of. We spoke about the focus that was on him, not least of which because of the events of last year, but obviously also winning the Scottish Open the week prior. And it just never got going, kind of even par 71 in the opening round when a lot of others scored. And then nothing of significance, like under par through the next 54 holes, but 1, 2, and 3 under collectively, as opposed to finding that 5 or 6 under to get himself in the conversation. So solid. It's T6. It's another top 10 in a major. He racks them up for fun, but just never really got going to challenge. Takes us down. As I said, I don't want to spend too much time on Cam Young. He kind of bobbed his head 8 under through rounds 2 and 3, and then 2 over today. So bogey the first hole, and it was kind of all downhill from him there in the final pairing alongside Brian Harman. But Tommy Fleetwood's where I want to fall, Drews. He was my selection to win the tournament. Geez, the chest was out. Let me tell you, after round 1, I was like, oh, it's a coronation. Let's get the trumpets ready, roll the carpet out. It's happening. I was so convinced because it looked so convincing.
Yeah.
On Thursday evening, our time here in Australia. And then to look at the scorecard and see that he is 1 over through the next 54 holes is immensely disappointing when it was there to be won.
I could not agree more. I think it was probably one of the more disappointing weeks of the, disappointing sort of fallaways from the week when it was right there for the taking, to be honest. I mean, if there was a guy, again, did we fall into the trap of thinking these British blokes are going to play well because they've grown up playing it? I mean, Tommy Fleetwood plays here as much as anyone does on the PGA Tour, and that's once a year. So I don't know, maybe we got caught up in it. But yeah, really, I thought, honestly, was really disappointed with the way that he kind of fell away when he was right in amongst the action early on. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more that I can say about Tommy in terms of feel. I mean, numbers wise, having a look here, nothing really stands out. It was just outside the top 10 for strokes gained approach and 12th tee to green. But other than that, I mean, it was a pretty slim week all in all for Tommy. I don't know. I maybe I'm overstating it by saying it's one of the most disappointing rounds of the week or fallaways from the week. I don't know. Maybe that's hyperbole.
Look, I mean, I think in terms of the stage, he was literally sleeping in his own home. It was a genuine home game for him. I think a 50-minute drive each way, and in front of an adoring crowd that were doing everything within their power to lift him and simultaneously drag down anyone who dare challenge what felt like an almost inevitable ascension following that opening round. To not finish under par in your remaining 3 rounds is like there were plenty of birdies out there. We saw it.
Yeah.
And he's more than capable. So yeah, look, I don't have much more to say. It comes from a good place because I genuinely love watching him play golf. I think he's an awesome character in the game, and I think he deserves, to be there and challenging. And I thought he would, and I think he'll be as disappointed as anyone else walking away from Royal Liverpool this week.
Agreed. Who do you want to go?
Not one of our picks, but I just want to briefly mention what I think might be the story of the week, and that's Matthew Jordan, the Brit who finished in a tie for 10th alongside Tommy Fleetwood and Max Homa. Now, you'd be forgiven for not recognising that name alongside the 2 that he finished at 4 under with. But Matthew Jordan has been a member at Hoylake since the age of 7, qualified through final qualifying in the UK, and in his maiden, and look, I don't want to get too far ahead, but maybe only ever appearance at a major championship, which happened to be at his home club. He
Mm.
finishes inside the top 10. Just an awesome story. And
Very cool story.
if you haven't seen it, I urge you to kind of watch a few of the videos, especially the one that PGA Tour posted via their account of the reception that he got in the clubhouse after his final round last night. Our time was awesome.
Very cool.
Briefly, Drude's in a tie for 13, alongside 3 others was my roughie, Hideki Matsuyama. Pretty happy with that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
T13 in a major sounds strange for a guy who's won the Masters and is a generational talent. But we've not seen a lot out of Hideki for a long time. So I think I know we shared one of his obscene shots via the 19th Tee Instagram channel this week. His control with both the irons, but particularly the wedges this week, was unbelievable. And it was it was nice to see him back playing the golf we know he's capable of. So I was pretty happy with getting my roughie inside the top 15.
That's very, very good. Yeah. I mean, obviously had a few injuries and stuff that he's been dealing with as well. And yeah, no, that's a great pick. Well done getting that inside the top 15. I think that I chalk that up as a win. Anything inside the top 15. Well done.
We've got a little bit of a run here where we don't necessarily hit anyone, but I'm conscious I don't want to put words in your mouth. There may be some that stick out here that you'll want to touch on, whether it's briefly or otherwise, in the next kind of lot of players there as we head through kind of like the T17s through the early T20s.
Well, there were only 2 that I wanted to pick out, and they both actually finished T8, if I can just jump back up the leaderboard a little bit.
Please, yes.
Shubhankar Sharma.
Yes.
The Indian finishing inside the top 10. I was just wondering what the best finish by an Indian was at major championship golf. This is the second best finish of an Indian at major championships. The best finish was T5 by Anirban Lahiri in the 2015 PGA Championship.
The barn, yeah.
Yes, at Whistling Straits, which Jason Day won. And Cam Young, I mean, I know you said you weren't convinced before. I mean, but the numbers are hard to kind of look away from at the minute. I mean, he's played 10 major championships and finished inside the top 10 4 times. That's 4 of the last 8 as well. He finished inside the top 10 at the Masters and at the Open Championship this year. And he's finished T8 this year and second at last year's Open Championship. So he's putting together a good record. I mean, he's obviously still got a long way to go in terms of wins and making it really, I guess, on the PGA Tour. Hasn't won on the PGA Tour yet, but he's putting together a very good major record. So, sorry, they're just my 2 jumping back up the leaderboard. Not really too much to report from anything else in terms of that middle ground. I mean, Victor Hovland. I mean,
I just wanted
71st strokes gained around the greens, probably. Where he's at.
Which is so disappointing because it's something he's put an awful lot of work into, and we've seen. I mean, it's been a big part of the reason why he's been influential in the other majors this year. And he was 5 under through 54 holes, which I think had him inside the top 5 heading into the final round. And goes and shoots 2 over to drop back to 3 under for the tournament and a tie for 13. So I think probably as disappointed as he'll be of any of the major performances this year, which is unfortunate because he's got a game that should suit links golf well. And then the only other one I wanted to mention, only because I have to, is Jordan Spieth. Because there were times when he looked like the most natural winner of the tournament through 2 or 3 hole stretches. And other times that he missed putts from inside 3 feet. It was the true experience this week.
Which it's interesting because the putter's been the thing, right? Like we've always said, 100%. He's the generational putter. You'd take him for, gun to your head. You'd take him to shoot a 5-footer, right? 10-footer, 72nd strokes gained putting this week. But tee to green was 8th, was pretty good off the tee, just outside the top 10, which is, where he struggled. So, yeah, interesting for Jordan Spieth. But, on to the next.
He was in a big group at T23 that also included 2 of our selections. I'm going to let you lead off with the guy that you said was going to win the tournament before I get to the guy that was never going to, in my eyes.
Yeah, well, Ricky Fowler was obviously my selection to win. I mean, had a good third round, but then just couldn't really get much going on any of the other 3 days, and it wasn't like there were big blow ups of holes either. It
Mm.
was you look at the first round. I mean, he finished with a triple, which is probably just put egg on my face a little, but other than that, there was only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 13 pars on the first day. So he was playing relatively steady golf. He just kind of couldn't sink the birdies when he needed to, and I guess it's probably a little disappointing coming off where a pretty good run of form, and everything that had been clicking in terms of his irons. He was 52nd in strokes gained approach, 62nd around the green. The putter wasn't too bad. So, yeah, it was largely a disappointing week, I think, for Ricky. I think he would have liked to have been a little bit higher. Had he finished in the sort of the next group up around that T17, T13 mark, I'd probably say, yeah, that was, might have been a success. But I think this is clearly an F mark this week for Ricky.
Tend to agree. Tough to argue and disappointing to see. So also at a tie for 23 was Scotty Scheffler, who I said was not going to win, and won't in terms of major championships. I don't think for the foreseeable future, unless he fixes up his putting. He keeps like literally going out of his way to tell us it's not an issue, when it so clearly is.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather him just own it. Address it once and then not entertain any further questions, but to kind of try and pull the wool over our eyes or piss in our leg and tell us it's raining. It's a problem, and there's no shame in it. Everyone goes through it. But yeah, he's what's he there? He's 5 over through the middle rounds, 2 and 3, which is it's bad. And really quite bad. I mean, isolate the putting, the rest of the game compared to how he's been playing this year, which has been an all-time strokes gained year tee to green. It was not there at all, absent this week. So, yeah, not one of his better performances, which, we've got such lofty standards for him, which, he's a victim of his own success, but it was a down week. He is worth mentioning, though, because he did have one of 3 equal low rounds for Sunday. So he was one of 3 players to hit 67, 4 under 67, alongside Adrian Marunk and Tom Kim. What sets him apart, though, is none of our loyal listeners who participated in the giveaway around the 151st Open Championship nominated either Adrian Marunk or Tom Kim. But there was one in particular who said that Scotty Scheffler would have a 67 on Sunday. And was it Clags? Drews? I'll have to look at the actual Instagram handle, but I think it was Clags.
No, it was Jamie Woolley, 49, who tagged Clagus. But,
did he tag Clags? There you go.
Clags. So Jamie Woolley, 49, well done. You are the winner of our competition, and Marshy will be in touch to organise your prize, which is great. Just on Scotty Scheffler. Even the short game this week was pretty poor. So 74th strokes gained putting, around the green 34th, but then the rest of the game was top 10. He was 13th for strokes gained approach, 8th off the tee, 3rd tee to green. It was just anytime he got anywhere close to the green, the game just deserted him. So really disappointing, I think, all in all for Scotty Scheffler. So.
And highly unusual. And just a big thanks as well to our friends at Oakley as part of the giveaway. So obviously Jamie Woolley takes home a pair of Oakley sunnies of his choice, and he'll get a box of balls there from Callaway as well. So big thanks to our great friends at Oakley for those sunnies and their ongoing support. So we've covered, I think,
I've got them crossed off here.
Won't, and Ruffy. We've covered your will, won't.
And that's it.
And that's it. So let's get to your Ruffy. Let's cross that off, and then we'll go to our wants.
Rob McIntyre, I don't even know where he finished. He was down the bottom of somewhere. Right. Yeah, he was
not anywhere high.
No, he was T71, which was actually only 3 places off DFL. So yeah, 5 over today, just had nothing really going for Bobby Mack, which was really disappointing because he had some great form leading in and conditions that he probably should have relished, and maybe I fell victim to the oversimplification that these guys from Ireland and Scotland and England should play well at these tournaments. So yeah, disappointing for Robbie Mack. Probably not much more from me on Bobby there.
Yeah, and not least of which, you want to talk about the oversimplification of assuming guys from the UK and Ireland will play well at the Open Championship. That's personified in my want to win, who I don't think you're also forgiven for thinking a previous champion from the Open Championship would play well. That wasn't the case for our man, our spirit animal, Shane Lowry, who in fact missed the cut after a 6 over 77 in the second round.
Yeah.
So no
Rough.
good. No good for the 2019 Open champion. And I think that's a neat segue to your want to win, because it'll allow us an opportunity to go through the remainder of the Australians. Obviously, we touched on Jason Day finishing a tie for second. But Smithy, the defending champion, was your want to win from memory, Druids. And he, not terrible. I mean, it never really got rolling. There were some exciting moments in isolation without it necessarily equating to an end-to-end round of golf that put him in the conversation. But not a bad showing at all from the reigning champion.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably a little bit more harsh, I think. Like, I actually think it was pretty disappointing,
yes,
to be honest.
I'm here for it. Let's talk it. Okay.
I mean, all we'd really heard about was that I think he'd won a live event in London in the lead up, and things were going well, and of course the reigning champion. But yeah, just I think it's actually quite disappointing for him to finish as low as he did, to be the third place Aussie. The putter was just non-existent. 45th in strokes gained putting, 36th around the green, 40th off the tee. Yeah, I thought it was a disappointing week all in all for Cam Smith. So yeah, unfortunate, because it would have been great for him to go back to back, but that's obviously an incredibly difficult thing to do. So yeah, T33s finishes alongside some interesting names in there: Patrick Reed and Patrick Cantlow. So, and Richard Bland.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Smithy was also your selection for the highest finishing Aussie, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that Min Woo? Which way did you go?
I said I think Min Woo was going to be the highest finishing Aussie. I can't quite remember, actually. I didn't write that down.
Okay. Well, I said Adam Scott, who also finishing in tie for 33rd alongside Cameron Smith.
Yeah.
And yeah, Scotty, I mean, 1 over, 2 over even, finished well today at 2 under to kind of claw his way back up to, finishing 1 over par and a tie for 33rd. Not brilliant, but not terrible. Relatively mediocre across the 4 days without lighting the world on fire. So he finishes top of 33 alongside Scotty. Your man, the man from the West, the man from Royal Fremantle, Min Woo Lee, finishes in its half of 41st after a disappointing 4 over today, but it was really the first probably 36 holes, particularly 3 under in this second round, which kind of catapulted him into the top 10. Phenomenal stat from Justin Ray. The only man to be in the top 10 of all 4 majors after 36 holes in 2023. Min Woo Lee. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. But
disappointing.
Look, 5 over through the next 36 is not great. Yeah.
Nah, I mean, and actually the inverse of kind of what we expected. We thought off the tee and the irons were going to be really good, and it was actually the putting and around the green. He just finished outside the top 10 in both of those categories, whereas he was 70th with irons and 50th off the tee. So yeah, pretty disappointing all in all. 57th tee degree strokes gained. So yeah, pretty disappointing, I'd suggest, for Min Woo. I would have liked to see him a little higher.
And I think still, obviously, with a little bit of uncertainty over his status. I mean, finishing high here probably all would have been assured that locking up the tour card for next year. But that pursuit continues. We know what he's capable of. Won't surprise me at all if he goes back and strings together some good performances in the US. But that's probably one other disappointing element of kind of limping out with a 5-over across the last 36 holes is missing an opportunity to probably really secure his place on the PGA Tour. In terms of the other Australians or Australasians in the field, because we shouldn't ignore Ryan Fox, who did exceptionally well just to get to the weekend. So Foxy was 7 over through the first round and then goes and hits a 67 to make the cut on the number. So that was impressive. And then he goes 1 over through the next 36 holes. So he finishes in a tie for 52nd. And then there are no other Aussies that made the weekend.
No.
So Lucas Herbert, who at one stage led the tournament in the opening round, Droots, before making a 6. I think it was a triple on 17, including 2 shots from the bunker. That was really tough scene for Herbie. And then the remainder of the Aussies in the field, Trav Smythe missed the cut. The complete inverse fortunes on the 17th. He actually hit an ace in his second round on Little Eye. Hayden Barron was 9 over through 2 rounds. Daniel Hillier, the Kiwi who recently won on the European Tour, he missed the cut as well, as did our man Mika and Connor McKinney, the West Australian amateur, Harrison Crowe as well. So I think you'll remember I said, I believe Harrison Crowe, Connor McKinney, and Hayden Barron were all at 1,001 to 1. I guaranteed that one of them would make the weekend. Wasn't to be. No, was not to be. So, look, a relatively good showing from the Aussies. Would have liked to have seen a few more make the weekend, but it was a quality and deep fielding. There was best part of 10 there. So, that's another year done for Australian men's major streets.
Yes, a couple of things just to call out alongside that. Finishing also at 9 over par. So Daniel Hillier and Hayden Barron also finished alongside Phil Mickelson at 9 over par. Hillier, Barron, Micheluzzi, and Connor McKinney all beat Dustin Johnson, who finished at 13 over and missed the cut.
Yes.
And my man Adri Arnau had one of the great shockers, finished second last at 21 over par. So that was a complete disaster. So just a couple I wanted to call out there.
Second last only to the Jazzman, Janawatananond from Thailand. Jazz hands, 22 over through 2 rounds.
Tough scene.
Took some names. Did Royal Liverpool.
It did. Well, I can't imagine that poor Jazz grew up playing, much links sort of conditions in Thailand there.
Probably not a lot of links golf, I would have thought. Any other players before we maybe just round out with some thoughts on the course? Okay, hit me.
Christo Lamprecht,
my
6'8" South African, fell off a cliff taller than himself. Was leading the tournament after the first round, and I was watching on the second day and him walking in, and he looked as lost as we all were, thinking, how's this bloke leading the tournament? And then just, kind of fell off a cliff and finished second last alongside his fellow countryman in Tristan Lawrence.
It did feel inevitable, which is a little unfortunate. Totally. It was nice. It was nice to see. It was nice to see, but it did feel inevitable. I must admit, I think I wrote it in the day one kind of recap. He looked like someone who was a member. Then I subsequently found out that, in fact, he qualified for this tournament by winning the British Amateur, which was played at Royal Liverpool. So he had seen it before and done quite well. Very, very tall man. Very, very tall. And the juxtaposition of him being the highest placed amateur alongside the Open champion, similar to what they do at Augusta National, is hilarious because Brian Harman is a very short man.
Yeah.
So
that was good.
It was a lovely photo. Lovely photo.
What else you got from the tournament, just generally?
I just wanted to probably just talk about the course briefly. I thought it was excellent. Look, it's not as dramatic as a Carnoustie or a Royal Lytham St Anne's or a Dornoch or even a Portrush. It doesn't have the scale or the deference of land. I still found it striking. I still found that it asked questions. I thought I absolutely loved the internal out of bounds. Loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was a controversial element, particularly for some players, but I think it was a perfect example of links courses using. We kind of spoke to Gary Lisbon about that the thing that stands out about links golf is that nothing seems out of place, that the golf course simply fit around the plot of land, as opposed to what we see week in, week out on the PGA Tour, where things have been manicured within an inch of itself. And I think the internal out of bounds is a perfect example that it doesn't necessarily have the elements of other links courses, but it uses what it has naturally to its own advantage. And I really enjoyed it. I don't know about you. I just thought the course itself asked questions. A perfect example is the amount of drives you saw that trickled no more than 2 or 3 feet off the fairway, but were in mountains of trouble. And that's I think it's the perfect advertisement of links golf, because it's not like Woodlands golf or Parklands golf that we see on the PGA Tour, where you can bomb and you'll have a shot out of rough. Literally, like the unpredictable nature of the fescue rough, and a good drive, just getting a slightly novel kick out of a hump or a mound and trickling off the fairway by maximum, as I said, 3 or 4 feet, and you're in a world of trouble. I really, really enjoyed the point of difference.
I think I totally agree. Echo everything you said. What I love is the unpredictability of links golf, right? To your point there, a great drive takes an awful bounce, and people will say, well, it was a great drive and it should have got rewarded. Well, I mean, you hit the wrong part of the fairway, right? Like, don't hit it in that part of the fairway. The bunkering was great. I always love seeing players really struggle to get things going out of the bunkers, and players leaving shots in bunkers. I tend to agree. It was a great it was I'll use your term, great advertisement for links golf, because that's exactly what it was. The conditions reared up on the last day, which was great to see. I thought the new hole 17 was really cool. Actually, it took a lot of prisoners early on. There were and a lot of players negotiated it safely, and coming down the stretch, it was obviously a really integral part of a lot of players' rounds. So yeah, I thought it was great. It doesn't get the recognition that other open rotor courses do, but I really thought that Royal Liverpool delivered well this year, and obviously would have loved for the conditions to be baked out a little bit more, and maybe just a bit more wind and less rain. But we can't have it that way every year. So yeah, no, I was pumped with it.
Oh, I think it's and I think I just want to maybe echo. I know I've been pretty firm in the stance that maybe hasn't aged all that well on this podcast, and we get reminded of it around about this time every single year. I actually saw just before we came on, a loyal listener of this program and many people in the Australian golf kind of social media space would know Pulse, as he goes by, kind of raised the question, what's the better week, as often discussed on this podcast. And look, I think I'll always love the Masters, always. And it is one of my very favourite weeks of the year, not just as a golf fan, is getting up on that, that second week in April and spending the time watching, one of the most beautiful pieces of land in the world. But I just want to kind of echo what I said in the conversation that you and I had with Gary Lisbon. And I think a lot of that, Druids, is born of the fact that that's my memories growing up, is watching the Masters. I don't have a lot of memories as a child watching the Open Championship. I have memories falling in love with an idea of the game based on 1 week in April at Augusta National. Now, nothing about that situation is normal or natural, because, as we said, there's nothing inside the gates down Magnolia Drive that reflects more broadly what you find in Augusta, Georgia, outside the gates. It's truly like Disneyland for golf.
Yeah.
And worse still, depending on how you look at it, but I say worse still, it only really looks like that for about 2 weeks of the year, because the other 50 are spent trying to get it back to there. and try to make it look like that, to the extent that we paint grass and we paint and probably, genetically modify flowers and plant trees all the time. And as I've got older, I've probably appreciated the fact that things can be just as beautiful and pleasing and enjoyable to watch when very little is done to the ground at all. In fact, it might be more enjoyable. Yep. And the older I get and the more that I appreciate the game, I find myself completely and utterly drawn to the format of the game that breathed life into golf, that was its genesis. And I think that's probably at the very guts of the conversation we were having last week, the romantic nature we feel in this week as opposed to any other week, is because we feel a connection, I think, to the format that nothing else comes close to offering.
Yeah. No, I think that's well put. And I've been very staunch in that this is my favorite of the four majors. And it's, I just love seeing the natural beauty that hasn't really been messed with too much. I mean, it's certainly undergone variations as the years have gone by. But yeah, I love the Open. And this year, albeit we didn't have a winner that was out of that elite tier of player, but it didn't make it any less special for me to be able to sit back and watch it and see one of the great courses host a great tournament. So yeah, I walk away very pleased with this year's Open Championship and particularly with Royal Liverpool as someone who as a course that I didn't know particularly a lot about. After having spent a couple of weeks looking and researching and talking about it, I really, really like it as a course. So big ups.
I tend to agree. And I think basically bottom line, what I'm saying is, unless you're going to take us to a Kiowa or an LA Country Club or a Pinehurst, then the US Open and the PGA can go heave, because it's really two tournaments a year that I think will and truly separate themselves far and above the rest. I think that's probably it from me. I don't know if you have any other burning thoughts.
No, not really. Like I say, I think a lot of people have got caught up in it that it was a boring week because a bloke that we didn't know a lot about has won. And I think there's a sweet irony in that in a lot of ways. So, yeah, congratulations to Punter again. Great weekend for the Aussies in terms of the cricket, and for Punter Harman to win the Open Championship. Nice of him to juggle his commentary duties with winning a golf tournament.
All stars aligned as it relates to one of our all-time great captains of this nation. Look, that'll do us. I think that ties a nice, neat little bow on the 151st Open Championship from Royal Liverpool in Hoylake. As we said, Brian Harman, a 6-stroke winner. He is the 151st Open champion. He is the 2023 Golfer of the Year as it relates to the RNA, and a major champion who has had an unforgettable 4 days of golf at Royal Liverpool. Drudes, it's been a pleasure to reflect on it. It was a pleasure to spend a bit of time previewing it leading into it, as we like to adjust to these tournaments, particularly the Open Championship. A little bit of content coming down the pipe. So next week, have the pleasure of maybe one of the most recognisable faces in Australian golf. And I say that not even halfway ironically. It might feel that way when you hear the interview, because he is at his heart a satirical character, but he's now comfortably one of the most recognisable faces in Australian golf. And I speak, of course, of Ron Chopper. So Ron will join you next week if you've had the chat with Ron, which I just thought, hopefully it's not the last chat we ever had with Ron, but you could be the guinea pig, knowing, he was probably going to spend a bit of time on not just being the subject, but turning the tables. And I understand that's exactly what's happened. So looking forward to hearing that. We've also got a few other things up our sleeve that'll be coming down the pipe in the next few weeks, but next week it'll be Ron Chopper. And yeah, as I said, we've obviously got a little bit left to go in terms of big tournaments on the women's side of the game, but Not just that, all roads are leading to Rome, as they say. Marco Simeone Golf Club for the Ryder Cup coming up very shortly. So plenty to come looking ahead. Thank you, mate, as always, for your company. Thank you to our listeners for their loyalty. Hope you've enjoyed the week at Royal Liverpool. Back in your ears very shortly.